Yeah, I volunteered to moderate this panel because I think it's an important issue to speak about trafficking. It's not really something that you see in the media headlines when you hear about Sudan, but it's all the more important for it. Let me introduce the panelists that we have here today. We have a great panel. First up is Ms. Benija Dita Goperma. You have 15 years of experience with UNODC, United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And you're currently the thematic lead on preventing and countering trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants in the MENA region, based in the Regional Office for the Middle East and North Africa, covering 10 countries. Then we have Maxime Giraudet. You're a researcher and policy advisor in the development sector, serving as a key expert and senior project manager for Altai Consulting. You focus on human smuggling and trafficking, governance and fragility across these regions. It's very important to have you here as well. Then we have Mr. Morgan Mukhtar Ramadan. You are a former Interpol officer, so law enforcement. And you're currently the regional coordinator of the Regional Operational Center ROC. If you're not familiar with that, it's part of the Khartoum process in a way. And then we have Mr. Mutuku Nguli. Very happy to have you here as well. You were awarded a Government of Kenya plaque for peace building in 2010 in recognition of your contributions towards the construction of the peace building and conflict management national policy and architecture in 2009. And you're the current alternate chair of the Kenya UN Migration Network, besides UNODC and IOM. And then we have Dr. Suad Musa. You are from Al-Fashir. For those not, I think everybody knows Al-Fashir, you should. And you are a fellow and associate at the Horn International Institute for Strategic Studies in Nairobi. You're a feminist scholar, a writer in Arabic, a development practitioner, and an activist on gender equality. That concludes my introductions with the panel. Benija, can I ask you to get up on the stage and hold your presentation? Thank you.
Good morning. I hope you had a wonderful coffee break. I just wanted to touch base on the issue of trafficking in persons and smuggling of migrants very briefly. So trafficking in person in conflict-affected areas it's not a new issue. However, but in the recent years, with the deeper understanding of the intricate relationship between trafficking, sexual violence, conflict-related sexual violence, human rights violations, abuses, and conflict, it is increasingly evident that conflict really increases the vulnerability to trafficking and its severity as well. So this is clearly demonstrated by the severe abuse inflicted by armed and terrorist groups in ongoing conflict zones. The various forms of exploitations that arise in such contexts, and the large number of people made vulnerable by conflict and forced to flee. So data suggests, as per the last UNODC report, which was released in 2022, and we have the new report hopefully being launched this month as we speak. So the data clearly suggests that in the Middle East and North Africa region, this is a sort of a global report that we produce. 42% are from conflict countries in the Middle East and North Africa region, and 70% of them are women. So we all know that during conflict, state and non-state structures are very weak, and people resort to negative coping strategies for survival. So in one hand, there is a high chance of becoming a victim of human trafficking, but there are also people who engage as perpetrators out of desperation, out of need for survival. We have documented cases, and this is not specific to Sudan, but in conflict settings where family members have acted as perpetrators in these situations. The goods demand, everything increases during conflicts, and to continue the war, to find funding, criminal groups are really active, and they get into all kind of illegal or criminal activities where there is profit. And as you know, human trafficking is one of the most profitable criminal enterprise group globally, which is currently, the rough estimate is around 150 billion globally. So this is quite, I would say, a complex form of crime where we talk about trafficking in persons. So in terms of the true extent of sexual violence in armed conflict is very little known. We have more information from Sudan, but in general, it is quite limited. And it is limited because of the official data, inadequate data collection, the challenges in terms of data collection mechanisms, security concerns, and of course the taboo nature of this topic, which we have been discussing since yesterday. Although there are no prevalent study available, but we know that poor law enforcement and lack of accountability further hinder accurate information gathering on these incidents. In terms of smuggling of migrants, I would like to just present a few data. In terms of the recent study that we just updated in September 2024, we looked at the central Mediterranean route, looking basically at Libya, Tunisia, and Algeria, and we have seen an increase in smuggling. The estimate in terms of money, when we talk about smuggling of migrants, is around, let me just see, is between, in 2023, it's between 290 to 370 million USD. So in terms of Sudanese, the cases of Sudanese, but we have at least 4% of the population that have been detected in Italy and Malta are Sudanese. It's still low compared to other population, but it is an indicator that there is an onward movement, in which we've also demonstrated in yesterday's presentation, and we've also discussed a bit about it. In terms of use of smugglers, almost 92% of Sudanese reported having used smugglers to reach their destination. This is among the detected. But it is really a conservative estimate as well. So in terms of sexual violence cases in Sudan, we have 191 documented cases until now. But from the information on the ground, the community leaders, the activists working there, they mentioned that this is only 2% of the cases that have been reported. So why is it really important to address the issue of sexual violence and trafficking issues? I do not need to further elaborate, but it is really good to see that this topic has garnered more attention. We're speaking about it, and it is due to the work that has been going on the ground. For UNODC, we traditionally do not work in humanitarian settings, and this is purely based on our nature of work. But more and more, we see the need to work on trafficking in persons issues at humanitarian settings is because, as I mentioned, it is one of the most complex form of crime. Trafficking in person is very technical matter, and we have only dealt at the surface level. So this is, as shared by one of the panelists yesterday, it is one of the indicator under the protection indicators, but it should not be only the indicator. There's a lot that we need to do, and I would just wrap it up now and take your questions for further clarification and information. And I would also like to really thank MMC for inviting us, and I would have to say this is my first time presenting with partners working in humanitarian settings, so we really hope to do much more in this area together, and thank you for this opportunity once again.
Thank you, Binaj. If we can have Maxime, and then to everybody on the floor, we'll have a round of questions once we've run through the presentations. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm very pleased to meet you. I think that to start that presentation, I want to highlight the fact that the terms smuggling and trafficking are often used as umbrella terms that are used in sometimes politically charged contexts and can have very varying interpretations depending on the actors that use them.
Sorry, can we get a bit more volume for Maxime, please?
Is it better that way? Yeah. To ensure clarity, I just wanted very quickly to bring the definition from the United Nations Protocol against the smuggling of migrants, which, as we can see from the definition here, says that it involves the procurement of direct or indirect financial or other material benefits starting again. The procurement in order to obtain directly or indirectly a financial or other material benefits of the illegal entry of a person into a state party of which the person is not a national or a permanent resident. Of course, again, people use those terms very widely and very differently, and I will try to present some key findings regarding the use and the perception of smuggling by migrants in Sudan in 2024. My aim basically is to shed some light on who smugglers are, how they are used, and what they do, moving beyond the kind of broad generalizations that there are sometimes about the phenomenon, and anchor it in more concrete evidence drawn from data that was collected by the Mixed Migration Center in 2024. This is a presentation based on data from 320 phone surveys that were conducted between June and September 2024 with migrants in Port Sudan. All the migrants interviewed reported using a smuggler at some point during the journey, and the respondents predominantly comprised Eritrean, 48% of them, followed by Ethiopians, 26%, and also South Sudanese nationals, which amount to 18% of the respondents. I think it's also important to note that there are some reports of shifting routes of smuggling across Sudan. It kind of suggests that smuggling networks may no longer be as centralized as they used to be in Sudan, and of course this has significant implications for the interpretation of our findings today, because those findings might not be completely representative for the entirety of the country. Now that we've set the scene, I want to go into a few findings. Okay, it seems we have an issue on the layers. Facilitators and intermediaries are mostly identified within the communities. Most connection with smugglers occur through personal or community networks, often facilitated by family or friends. As you can see from the graph on the right, among respondents, 41% reported that their initial contacts with smugglers was facilitated by family or friends. 23% approached smugglers directly in person, and 15% made direct contacts by phone. These findings suggest that smuggling networks are deeply embedded within the communities, with a quite strong presence in respondents' areas of origin, and that there might be some also active connections to community members. This insight, I think, challenges a bit the notion of smuggling networks as strictly top-down, highly organized systems and organization, and it points out to a model where networks rely on brokers who operate directly within the communities at a point of departures. And those brokers might actually not be involved in those networks most of the time, but just be individuals with connections. As this highlight the role of the trusted networks and also the word of mouth and connections that people have within the community for the identification and the recruitment of smugglers. I think this findings also align with the broader reports about the diversity of actors within smuggling networks that most of the time range from very small to sometimes quite large and more organized operations. For many migrants, using smugglers was also perceived as the only or most viable option to travel. As you can see from the charts, so in purple you have the total, and shades of green gives you a breakdown of by nationality. You can see that 58% of respondents state that they actually knew absolutely no alternative, and 41% believed it would make the journey easier. This perception was particularly prevalent among Ethiopians and Eritreans, who are more likely to report having no alternative or believing that smugglers would ease their journey. That underscores the perceived difficulty and danger of migration, leading to an almost necessary reliance on smugglers, especially for Ethiopians and Eritreans. This aligns with the reports that we know of quite tight border control at the Sudan, Eritrea, and Sudan-Ethiopia border. And the more, it kind of confirms also the broader pattern that we know about smuggling in general and conflict. Smugglers most of the time feel a critical gap as they are acting as facilitators for those who are seeking to move in very complex environment. To fit into this narrative, it's important to note that a majority of respondents also perceived smugglers as reliable, with most reporting that smugglers helped them reach their destination without misleading them. You can see that 64% of respondents either agreed or strongly agreed that smugglers assisted them in achieving their migration goals, and furthermore, 56% disagreed with the statement that they were intentionally misled by their smugglers, which kind of supports the broad argument that smugglers are often viewed as facilitators and provide a necessary service in the challenging conditions that migrants face. Finally, I think that's also quite an important point, as smugglers are sometimes perceived as both service providers but also criminals. You can see from the chart here that 58% of respondents say that they would see smugglers as service providers, while 21% identified them as criminals. This might appear as contradictory, but I think it instead reflects the intricate and very nuanced nature of migrant-smuggler dynamics. Migrants are often considered smugglers to be instrumental and reliable service providers, essential for navigating the challenges of migration, but at the same time, their trust can also be tempered or nuanced by the awareness of the risks involved in their journey, as well as their knowledge of the illegal nature of the smuggling activities that are provided by a smuggler in general. It underscores the intricate relationship that migrants have with smuggling activities in general. And to conclude, I'd like to highlight two very contrasting examples that I think are quite interesting to reflect on the policy implications, which are Libya and Ukraine, as they offer very valuable lesson. So the protracted civil war in Libya offers important lessons on the inertia of conflict and its impact on the smuggling dynamics. While Sudan and Libya are very different examples, we saw in Libya that the deterioration of the economic situation has turned human smuggling and trafficking into very significant revenue streams for a lot of armed groups who were looking for revenue to fund their war efforts. I think it was in the last report from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organized Crime on Sudan that we saw initial evidence of armed groups facilitating smuggling networks either by accepting bribes or turning a blind eye on smuggling dynamics. And that put in line with the fact that we saw a very systematic destruction of economic assets in Sudan, I think is a cautionary tale in case the conflict continued to last in Sudan on the role that smuggling might take in terms of the war economics. And finally, a few words about Ukraine, which offer a very stark contrast, but I think is quite interesting from a policy implication perspective. As the conflict in the invasion of Ukraine broke out, the European Union put together the Temporary Protection Directive, which provided safe and legal routes for Ukrainian asylum seekers and effectively preventing the need for smuggling across Europe. I think that's something that was very well documented by MMC and UNODC, there is virtually almost, to a few exceptions, no smuggling networks for Ukraine refugees. It kind of illustrates the fact that when migrants have access to legal alternatives, smuggling networks lose their relevance. And while addressing existing smuggling networks is definitely a policy imperative, it's also equally important to recognize that the criminalization of all forms of smuggling without providing any alternative creates a dangerous vacuum, as in general, when legal migration pathways are absent, people don't stop moving, they just embark in more dangerous journeys. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Maxime, for that. If I can ask Morgan to get up on the stage and hold your presentation, please. Thank you, and maybe somebody to help with the presentation. Thank you.
Honorable and distinguished guests, all protocol observed. There's a message. Yes. Honorable and distinguished guests, all protocol observed, allow me to introduce the Regional Operational Center, ROC, and its contribution in fighting trafficking in person and smuggling of migrants. The ROC is the Regional Operational Center in support of Khartoum Process, the African Union, Horn of Africa Initiative, and IAPCO. I will take you through this presentation on the developments of the trafficking in person and smuggling of migrants in Sudan. Overview: the Regional Operational Center, the cooperation of neighboring country with Sudan, ROC and the Continental Operational Center, Sudan Challenge, foreign fighters and mercenaries for Sudan wealth, the recommendation. The ROC relies on a legal framework based on the following institution and convention. Palermo, which is the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime, known as the Palermo Convention, and signed it in December 2000 in Palermo. It was the first criminal law instrument designed to combat transnational organized crime. The convention is complemented by 3 additional protocols on trafficking in persons, smuggling of migrants, money laundering, illicit manufacturing of firearms, trafficking in firearms. And we have Valletta Action Plan, which is a set of political and operational measures to enhance cooperation between the African and the European countries to provide a framework for human and sustainable management of migration on both sides of the Mediterranean. And as explained yesterday by the panelists from the African Union Commission, Dr. Sabilo and Madame Barbara from the Secretary of ICMPD, about the Khartoum Process, which is a platform for the political cooperation among the countries along the migration routes between the Horn of Africa and Europe. And we have also IAPCO Constitution, which is known as the East African Police Chief Cooperation Organization. So those are the framework of the ROC under which the Regional Operational Center is operating. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like Vegas rules to be applied for this presentation, as ROC is a technical instrument of the European Union, and we have a restriction of the European Union and the confidentiality of the database of the persons. The term Vegas rules comes from saying what happened in Vegas stays in Vegas. When used in a meeting, the rule says whatever is said in the meeting must be kept private to the people who are in the room and should never be repeated to others. Thank you for your understanding. As I said, that the Regional Operational Center, the main goal is, or our main mission is to collect information about the traffickers involved in trafficking in human beings. And this collecting of information is coming from the member states. And those member states, they are seconding a liaison officer who are representing a country through whom the information is shared and arrive to the center. And then we have technical advisors who are dealing or treating the information which come out through other intelligence reports, which is shared through the Interpol channels, the I-24, the network of communication, and the AfriPol systems. So the member states of the ROC are 12 member states currently, and they are as follow: Burundi, Chad, Djibouti, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, DRC, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, Uganda, and Yemen. Those, as I said, the seconded liaison officers through whom the information about the criminal networks are shared with the ROC and then disseminated to the interested or to the concerned countries. So the ROC and the Continental Center. So the Regional Operational Center will be handed over to the African Union, as I said, as a recommendation or the ongoing discussion between the two Commission, African Union Commission, and we set up a technical working group for preparing the handover of the ROC to the African Commission. The relation between Sudan and ROC, and this is an important point, on October 2021, after the coup d'etat by the military, as described by the international community, the activity of ROC has been suspended, or the activity of ROC has been relocated to Kenya. And this, it creates a tension between Sudan and the ROC, between Sudan government and the ROC. Till December 2022, on the annual general meeting of IAPCO, where we met with the Director General of Sudan, and he established a channel of communication convincing and showing the importance of Sudan. And at the end of our discussion with him, we visited Sudan, and to show the importance of the Sudan, one of the most wanted trafficker has been arrested in Sudan in 31st of December 2022. And it was Kidani Zacharias, who was recognized as the top trafficker in Africa. Then the visit continued. Last October, we have been in Sudan, and we met the authorities as there are many new issues come up, and it concerns the regions. Sudan cooperation with the neighboring countries. The interest or the concern of the neighboring countries of Sudan in a technical issue on what we are discussing with the point of contacts, they worry about the prisoners who escaped from Sudan and what will happen after. And this engagement helped them to at least to have a prevention from the impact or what can happen by those criminals who are everywhere, and some of them are involved in the fighting, in the current fighting of Sudan. And also, the foreign fighters, there's an extraordinary meeting called by Ethiopia and by South Sudan and Sudan to discuss the issue of foreign fighters on the technical issue and how we can help or how we can prevent the nation of the neighboring countries from those foreign fighters or the ongoing fight. and there was a recommendation on that. And recently, last month or last week, we were in Addis Ababa for the same issues as the issue, there are some subjects coming up we have discussed. So I will take you through the engagement and the issues actually which is related to the discussion in Addis. It was about the upcoming of the new foreign fighters and the mercenaries. And it has been shown that the reasons why those foreign missionaries are coming, and as and the information collected is showing that the interest on the gold and the interest of the resources or hard currency looted from the banks and the vehicles. Those foreign fighters, some of them are coming to have, or in their contracts, they are encouraging them that the spoils of war is theirs, and they are engaged to fight only for 2 or 3 months. So this, the ways that the current information or the recent information we get as the borders are not controlled, and this is the way that how the currently the RSF sometimes are exchanging migrants with weapons or migrants with food and oils with some country or with some borders point which is under their control. At the end, this is the recommendation the Regional Operational Center can submit to this conference. We will encourage to have a law enforcement cooperation with the member states, especially those member states neighbor to Sudan, and also the country who are facing the same problem of Sudan as on a technical issue we are discussing, like DRC and Ethiopia, as mentioned by the representative of the Ethiopian Commission of Rights. There is a conflict on the north of Ethiopia, and we are aware, we are working closely with the law enforcement agency of Ethiopia on that. And the issue that also we have remarked that the use of the drone by those rebels or by the armed groups. And this, I think, it is an issue need to be highlighted by the international community to review, because most of those people, armed group are using those drones sometimes to on the residential area. So most of the victims are the citizens, and they need to be protected from these illegal actions. The traffickers are using, actually, as said, the issue of Egypt. Currently, some Sudanese, they have facing some challenges on getting, I'm about to finish it. It's an important point, and then I finish. Regarding the visa, and as we have a lot of community, and even some of my relatives are there, so, you know, there are some restrictions by the Egyptian authorities regarding the visa. To have a visa, even for education, for the treatment, you need a security clearance, which costs almost $2,000. But fortunately, as we are following news yesterday, there's a visit of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt, and I think this issue has been put on the table, and they are going to fix it. This is the information that we get from our two counterparts, Sudan and Egypt. So at least it's a good news for our Sudanese people in Egypt and the others, especially the students and the doctors or the sick persons who are going to have a treatment. So I will stop here as I was running out of time, and I will give the chance for the others. Thank you.
Thank you, Morgan. Thank you for that. Mutuku, can I ask you to come up on the stage and do your presentation? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Is it noon yet? Okay, good morning. Sorry, yeah. Yeah, that's one. Thank you for this opportunity. Most of what I want to say has already been touched on by my co-panelists who have gone ahead of me, but I'm just going to put a few emphasis on a few areas. Okay, that's just a preamble of the Sudan war and possibly what entails of that war now as it is. I think we discussed this since yesterday, and that information is in your domain. But then I can just touch a bit on the vulnerabilities of the Sudan war. What the war brings on the table is forceful displacement of population to the neighboring countries, both also inside this country itself, where we have lots of IDPs who need help and who are also exposed. Then we also have the exposure of women, children and the aged, plus the disabled and the young girls, who are actually out in a movement which is not well defined and possibly offering hope and a future. There are a raft of things that I've mentioned there: forced family, like family dysfunction, separation and loss of control, illiteracy and breakdown of social fabric, which leads to prostitution, forced labor. And then most important also for me was forced conscription into the military or to the fighting forces, which I think has been very, very evident in the process of sustaining this war. The significance of the numbers we got yesterday. The countries involved in cross-border displacement were outlined yesterday: Egypt, Libya, South Sudan, Chad, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Central Republic, Uganda, and others who cross by sea to the Gulf countries. But we also have spillovers to other countries. I think the ones that have been mentioned here have the significant numbers of the displacement population. Personally, we have hosted in our shelter a group of Sudanese women and their children sometime early this year. And the stories we got, they are not looking promising if nothing is done to help and support the populations that have been displaced. A colleague of mine just mentioned this is a very lucrative business. Criminal enterprise which attracts a total of $150 billion every year. You can imagine what that means to the, to the traction and how they are able to buy their way, whether we like it or we don't like it. There is a way they do this and make it happen for them. The dynamics of this displacement include human trafficking, smuggling, abductions, forced labor, GBV, and many more that are an outcome of the displacement itself. So, human trafficking, where does this concept start from? It's not recent. It's an old concept, and it was defined in various ways in both the 19th and the 20th century, mainly from Europe. And basically, when this was dying off, the term human trafficking was conceived to explain the modern way in which people are being exploited, moved and defrauded of their decisions of what they want to do in life. So, human trafficking in the Palermo Protocol, as was explained earlier, actually involved the following things. It involves recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, and receipt of persons by means of threat, force, coercion, of abduction, fraud, deception, abuse of power, positions of vulnerability, and or the giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve consent of person to have a control over them. And I think that is very, very common in our situation. And all this is meant to create an opportunity to exploit. This is a very simple way in which you can look at human trafficking when you want to understand. And these are things that are happening in everyday life situations for populations that are moving. In fact, traffickers are mainly embedded in the populations because they are very close people to the victims. They are the ones who are able to convince, they are the ones who are able to buy the confidence of the victims, and they're the ones who are also articulating where they want to take these people. But it becomes a crafty scenario for them because it ends up in the exploitation at the bottom. Manipulation to consent involves all those factors, and giving or receiving payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person, having control of another person, and we say that victims often cooperate in initial stages of trafficking processes. So in Sudan, the process is exactly the same in the articulation of how traffickers are taking advantage of vulnerable population using the same factors that I've mentioned above to be able to move populations to destinations which end up being exploitative environments. In the minimum, this is what we find. And we say that the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, and receipt of a child for the purposes of exploitation shall be considered trafficking in persons. Children have no locus to provide consent to any of these proposals by traffickers. But by virtue of the other factors, other than recruitment, they fit in the description. And that's how also children find themselves as victims of trafficking. Then I think smuggling has been defined earlier, and basically it just provides, the aircraft. The most important thing is that human smuggling is conducted in order to obtain financial or other material benefit for the smuggler. Even though elements of crime, even so financial gain or material benefit are not necessarily elements of the crime. For instance, sometimes people engage in smuggling to reunite families, and human smuggling is generally with the consent of the person being smuggled. So these definitions are just provided so that at least if somebody didn't have the clarity, you can also understand how smuggling seems to be a very attractive business in this world of criminal enterprises. And this is just the separation of what trafficking and smuggling portends in our modern world today. So in summary, human trafficking, for me, I find it as a business of stealing the freedom of another person for profit. I stop there, thank you.
Thank you, Mutsuku. If I can ask you, Dr. Suad, to get up on the stage and present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, and good morning to all of you. And thanks to our presenters, smuggling and trafficking, and especially I'm going to focus on sex trafficking of women, refugees, and IDPs. And of course, all the information presented here, they are all relevant to the case of Sudan, although at different levels, because some of these issues really never been discussed in Sudan. Smuggling, it was going on for years, but there was no kind of a serious kind of initiatives to address it, not in terms of research to know the scale of it, and also in terms of analyzing it in terms of qualitative kind of data. Now, we all understand that if there was no war in Sudan, then they wouldn't be, we come here and sit and discuss about sexual, trafficking. And trafficking is always involved, as my colleague explained, that it is about coercion and exploitation, whereas the smuggling is about a voluntary kind of option that people take and pay for it, that because they want to go to or to cross borders, and it's always about international crossing of borders. Now, when we talk about the sexual or the sex trafficking of women, it really has become an alarming. But the problem is that talking about sex or any issues about sex trafficking or sexual problems is a taboo and that people always shy away from talking about it. And whenever, and even the, at individual level, we know that there are some incidents and even serious incidents, but we don't dare really to talk about it. But now situations has really become completely different. And this war, as also it is mentioned in terms of information and data, that the majority of the displaced are women. And whether they stay as internally displaced with their children in shelter houses, or they join some camps, because in this war there hasn't been any kind of new camps established. It's just people, they just join the old camps like Zamzam, like Nefasha, like whatever in Darfur, or they just cross the borders to come to mainly maybe to go to Egypt, to North Africa, and to come here mainly now, as we say that there is an outward movement towards the Horn of Africa, mainly Ethiopia and Uganda and Eritrea and those countries. And so those women, they come alone. And when they come, actually they come without any kind of support, without any sources of income to support their survival needs here. And also they come without any acquaintances who can serve as their social safety nets. So they just become on their own. And then they lose everything. So what are they gonna do? The country, or the host country, does not have any kind of support, not from the UNHCR, that adequate support that can meet their demands, whether they are surviving needs, whether renting houses or hostels, because if you go to Uganda, to Kampala, then you need $100 to pay for a monthly rent. And so how can those women, they pay that money, from what sources? And then added to the surviving needs, to daily expenses. And when we talk about women, about the adolescents and about young women, that means we are talking also, we need also to consider the feminine needs in terms of personal items that those girls or those adolescent needs, and there is no source. So they become easy target of sex trafficking, perpetrators and criminals, because they are in need of this support. And that is why it has become very difficult even to detect who, the extent of, or the scale of this problem. However, when I was in Kampala 10 days ago, I was doing like a kind of discussion, individual discussions and group discussions. And during these discussions, it really appeared that these people, they feel, and also they have authentic information about sex trafficking, because of among women and those young adolescents, because of the reasons that I mentioned. And so when we come to say that this is a consent, or this is the kind of coercive kind of behavior. So they just they fall in the trap of sex trafficking. There is also one of these cases that a woman, she is a very young Sudanese woman, and she was talking to me about her personal experience, that also she fell in the trap of sexual assaults and trafficking, and then without any kind of sympathy, without any solidarity, without any kind of support from the Sudanese community. And that is because this issue, it's about sexual trafficking, about sex is a taboo, and it is a stigma, because we always blame or place the blame on the victim, so that people don't talk about it. But the good thing is that that woman, or that young woman, she just really shared her experience in the social media. And then it's become, like everybody knows about it. That was also enough reason for her to be isolated, because people are not used, to this kind of publication, to publicize this experience. But for us, we find that this is also, it is a way of, breaking the ice about the stigmatization of this issue. Anyway, this is one of the issues. There are so many that really need research. What we are going to do, or what we are trying to discuss, is about, because now we talk about all this information, but we never heard about what these international institutions, including the African Union, and apart from talking about mercenaries and about fighters and about all these things, because and it is very also strange that we talk about fighters, mercenaries, and in this context of war in Sudan, all are mercenaries. All fighting in Sudan, they are mercenaries, or this side or that side. But we are now trying to stop and to protect that. So it is the issue of protection of women who cross the borders, and we need that also the support from the host countries. That host countries also, they need also to be accountable to and also to rise to the challenge of the needs of those refugees who don't have any kind of support. And those African Union, because they are closest to these countries, what kind of measures, context-specific measures that can address these specific problems. We know smuggling here in the Horn of Africa is a well-ingrained kind of behavior and a problem. But these countries, they have developed really a very extensive kind of legislation to address this. So the smuggling, the smuggles to the Arab area, the Arab region, the domestic workers and whatever. And especially in Uganda, they have, and also in Ethiopia, they have a very strong and forceful kind of legislation. But when it comes to refugees, whether Sudanese refugees or whatever, we don't hear. Maybe we don't know, maybe there is something, but anyway, we need also to work with, to make alliances, to build alliances, and also networking with the feminist organizations in these countries, women, and also with the legislative organizations, and to have a kind of advocate for introduction of new legislation and policy that really address this issue. And then also we need, including the CMM and other like-minded organizations who put the, who take concern, are concerned about this issue. At the same time, we need really to know the extent of this, issue. And because it is the difficulty of people talking about it, that means that we need to really to develop a kind of methodology that make it easier for people to talk. Of course, methodology that has a kind of confidentiality and privacy, and maintained all these ethical, codes and ethical kind of measures, just to ensure the safety of the person, and also we need also those women. Really, we need this humanitarian, the UNHCR, and to look in a different way on how to support the refugees. It is not about all the time, it's about giving food and whatever. There is other kind of support that really we need to talk about those people and to ask about the exact need that they need in terms of accommodation. Sorry, in terms of accommodation, in terms of helping them to have their own enterprises so that they can really depend financially on something sustainable, and then so that is, and then we may hear from you, and thank you.
Thank you, Suad, and these were very interesting presentations, and I've noted down some questions, but maybe just some quick takeaways that I took away from those presentations. So one is that trafficking and smuggling are complex crimes that are deeply linked with displacement. So when we talk about displacement, that is something that really factors into that. Then that legal pathways and generous visa policies, and also prima facie recognition, I mean, that didn't come up, but that's an important part for me. In the destination countries are really crucial. And I think also in terms of our diplomacy, that's something that we do focus on. My own home country, Germany, is one of the countries that has welcomed over 1 million Ukrainian refugees, and we were intimately involved in the Temporary Protection Directive. Thanks for bringing that up. And then that law enforcement cooperation is really important. It's a really important asset in interdicting some of these dynamics. But so is the legal framework, and of course the implementation of it, and maybe the retargeting of that, or the inclusion of other vulnerable groups in these legal frameworks to an extent that goes beyond, for example, legal protection of overseas employment. which is a dynamic here in Eastern Africa. And then, of course, that sexual exploitation is a particularly damaging facet of this issue, with potentially long-lasting societal impacts. The stigma is an important aspect of that, and I agree very much with what you said, that we have to break the ice on that, and we have to match humanitarian programming to that as well. I noted down some questions that I have, if I can start with you, Benija. How has the conflict evolved from your viewpoint, and how has your work on trafficking and smuggling in this region evolved as a result of that? Thank you. And I think we have just a little bit of time, if you can be brief. Thank you.
Sure. From our observation, that working in conflict settings, there are certain policy legalities and certain capacity and infrastructure issues that really need to be put in place. As you can see from data, even during stable times or even in the most developed countries, this is one topic which is very difficult to investigate and bring the criminals to court. And one of the reasons, as I mentioned, is it is one of the most complex form of crime, is because we're talking about a human being who has been violated, who has been exploited. And I just wanted to add to the presentation of my colleagues that when the person has been identified as a victim of human trafficking, consent is irrelevant. So we do not also look at the other provisions that have been provided by the trafficking protocol. For example, the issue of non-punishment when it comes to victims of human trafficking, the issue of abuse of position of power. So there are several measures that we all can use, which we have not really explored when it comes to even in a normal setting, I would say, but more so is very important in conflict settings. This is the shift we've had to also make. The other thing that we often get is that, okay, the traditional justice mechanism and the law enforcement institutes are, of course, weakened during times of conflict and war, but there are other provisions. There are, for example, beyond the national legislation our country has, and if they are, if the crime and the atrocities are able, we are able to document, provide evidence. Human trafficking, as I mentioned, is a grave violation of human rights, and it can fall under the jurisdiction of the ICC. So there are several mechanisms that we could also use and explore, and this is something we have also had to shift in our focus when we work in humanitarian or conflict settings.
Yeah, thank you, thank you, Benija, for that. Mutuku, maybe, how can migration governance contribute to fighting trafficking and smuggling?
Thank you. Actually, migration governance basically is the framework that would be able to offer, durable solutions when dealing with the attendant outcomes of war, which leads to human trafficking and smuggling of persons. I would look at how a good migration governance policy or framework would provide the opportunity to offer a comprehensive intervention for victims, survivors, and also look at the reintegration framework back to their communities and their families, because there's something that has been lost that cannot be recovered, like in a coordinated manner of intervention. And this is what we look at when we talk about good migration governance framework, helping to support the process of both rehabilitation and the reintegration of survivors and victims of human trafficking and smuggled victims. And I want to just say this so that it is clear. One thing can lead to another. A smuggled person can also end up being trafficked. And that is very important because, as you saw, the smuggler's role ends at delivering you at destination. And most of the time, people who are delivered to those destinations have no idea what is going to await of them. Then there could be another criminal enterprise of human traffickers who are actually waiting to pounce on you and exploit or move you to a destination where you will be exploited. So that connection is very important to understand, so that at least you may not separate the two, not necessarily that they work that way. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mutugu, for that. Maybe I can go to Maxime and ask you what are some of the differences between Sudan and since you brought up Ukraine, and maybe we can extend the Sudanese dynamic where you said it has some similarities with what we're seeing in Libya currently. Maybe you can compare those two a little bit for us and sort of put it into context. What are some of the differences in the dynamics that we see there? Thank you.
Sure, thanks a lot for the question. So yeah, of course, Sudan and Ukraine are widely different contexts, and of course, I use the Ukraine example to bring a very successful policy example, which might not be replicated the same way in Sudan. Ukraine is very specific, as it was bordering the European Union. The European Union had the ability to offer this kind of coordinated approach to a policy response to incoming asylum seekers and migrants, which might not be the case at all in Sudan. Although there are some regional mechanisms at play, there is not the same ability to offer in a few days such a harmonized response. So in the case of Sudan, I really think that, of course, diplomacy, the role of the international community, as well as the responsibility of all the governments involved are very important in order to build on the existing legal mechanism offered mostly by the UNHCR on prima facie recognition to cross borders. So it might take more time. It's not something that can happen in easy and very direct way, but that's critical in order to ensure that those legal pathways exist, and that migrants can resort to migration mechanisms that do not push them to smuggling and to any form of harmful behavior. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxime, and I totally agree with that legal pathway is just beyond the current dynamic that we see in Sudan with the large displacement crisis is an important tool in preventing the criminalization of migration, of course. Morgan, you mentioned the mercenaries. I mean, that's something that in my line of work we track closely as well. What in your view, you alluded to some of that a little bit. You said migrants are being traded for oil, migrants are being traded for weapons. What are the linkages between both the warring parties in Sudan, but also allied, related, and sometimes conflicting armed groups with human trafficking and smuggling?
Thank you very much, moderator. Actually, when the two issues of the foreign fighters and mercenaries are connected. So from the information we collected by the law enforcement agencies, so some of the victims, migrant victims, are exploited by the groups. They don't know that they are going to engage on the fighting. So in order to facilitate, and this is a case, as I said, what happened in northern Ethiopia and with Sudan. So on the other side also between the Sudan and South Sudan, this is a real example and cases that reported to the ROC. And the mercenaries, when they are coming, they are coming for, as I said, they are an advertisement. And there are some companies in some countries, as mentioned by the first panel, that they are interest of some country in a region. And those countries that they are behind encouraging or the arrival of the mercenaries and the fighters meanwhile. But we have to know that some neighboring countries, honestly, they play an important role in stopping the arrival of the fighters, because it was in their interest. And we have heard that, and those, when they stopped it, as I said, some borders are not controlled by the army or by Sudan government. So there's a new ways of exchange of migrants with food, as they have a shortage of food on the borders. I mean, the RSF area. And also they need medications, so they are using such things to facilitate. And this is the interconnections between the armed groups and gangs, because there are a lot of gangs working or operating on the border area. We know that especially Sudan and Libya borders, Sudan and South Sudan borders, Sudan and Ethiopia borders. So all these are encouraging environment for the continuing of the arrival of the mercenaries. But it will be also, or I can add also that what has been said by the former speakers about, honestly, if we want to address these issues, we cannot separate it. We need also to address the root causes of these problems, of course. So we cannot, because I attended a lot of debate and conferences in Europe and here in Africa, so they are not talking about the root causes of these problems. So we are dealing with the migrants. When we talk with the technicians, our language in a room, in a closed room, is different. Honestly, the countries, the view of the technician in all the country is not the same views of the politicians. But they say, we are not the decision makers of the country. So these issues need to be at least on the technical ways, on the technical levels, if there's a cooperation and a good willing, and we need this willing to be supported also by the politicians' levels. And this is, I think, what it's begun to be understood in the latest, during the last months.
Thank you, Morgan. And I think everybody here in the room would agree with the fact that the topic of migration is unnecessarily politicized to a large extent, and sort of trying to separate those issues is something we all endeavor to do. Dr. Suad, maybe now it's back.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to highlight
just to ask the actual question, if you can tell us a little bit about how sexual exploitation, which is not new to, how that has changed through the conflict. Thank you. How that has changed through the conflict, and maybe also some of the dynamics that you see, some of the trends that you see, and what the international community and also humanitarians as a part of that can do to better address that issue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope I understood your question correctly. Yes, the sexual exploitation, and because war in Sudan, let us talk about the Sudan, the North Sudan. That war started in 2003, and then we had really a kind of extensive kind of sexual exploitation and kind of trafficking as well. But as I said, as mentioned earlier, that it wasn't brought to the fore so that people can make any kind of comments, let alone to make any kind of programs or policy or legislation. So it's become hidden and continue to be hidden. With this war, because the number of women and one number of adolescents and girls and young people, they started to move. And then that movement was voluntarily, just those girls, they take their decision and then they cross these borders amid a complete kind of support at the points of entry that was people talk about yesterday, that there is no any kind of support in the way during the journey. So they become trapped in this exploitation. And then more people, as more women and more children and more adolescents, they cross the border, they become actually subject to more kind of violation of human rights. And because they are vulnerable to meet their demands and to afford any kind of their necessities, then they submit to this exploitation. Without any kind of support, without any kind, because even there are really dozens of organizations, of Sudanese organizations in these countries, and they are also those solidarity organizations in Ethiopia, Kampala, and other regions. But because the issue itself, as I said, it was a taboo, and it's continued to be a kind of a stigma. People don't talk about it. But they know that there is so many things going on, and the level that I heard, that how this problem has become really ingrained, and unfortunately by Sudanese people, that it is not, that is trafficking by people, from the host country. Most of these crimes are committed by the Sudanese men themselves, and then without any kind, of any sympathy or any kind of consideration to the situation, itself, that we have to take care, because that is the culture of Sudanese, that we all take care of of each other, and then we are always brothers and sisters. So that has become now like a kind of a break in that kind of social safety nets, that is feeling about the other as part of you, as a family member. Now, because of the war and because of this vulnerability, because those all people, even the traffickers, they are vulnerable to so many things, because there is no work, there is no, no education, and there is no. They also are forced sometimes, because even we need to understand what kind of forces, negative forces, that really lead them to adopt this kind of attitudes and whatever. So that is at the community level. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And maybe just before I open the floor, I think one additional takeaway clearly is as well that much of international attention, due to the fact that a ceasefire doesn't really appear to be coming anytime soon, unfortunately, much is focused on the humanitarian operation, which maybe does not yet focus enough on the issue of accountability. I read the fact-finding mission report of the UN Human Rights Council, which spoke of a climate of impunity, and I think that extends to this what we've been discussing here as well. I want to thank everybody in the panel and everybody in the room as well for great questions, great answers, great inputs. I hope that it's helped to raise the issue of trafficking and smuggling in persons as a neglected part of this conflict that we should all pay more attention to, and definitely something I'll be taking home with me as well. And with that, I'm so happy to conclude and let everybody go and have lunch.